Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of ICTV Headlines. As usual, I am your host, Dijana Kunovac, joined in studio yet again by Rob Harrington to talk some hoops. The Carolina basketball team had all three 2014 signees announced to the McDonald All-American team last week. You were part of the voting process. Very exciting times. It's the second time under Roy Williams that the entire class made the cut. So let's first go into the voting process before we get into all the guys. What exactly goes into that, and why did you vote all three to the roster?
Well, it starts in January, and they do that so that you can absorb what happens during the players' senior seasons. They start with about 100 players, and then you whittle it down over the course of 3 votes.
Oh, okay.
Every member of the committee selects 25 players, roughly by position, but not necessarily. There's room to fudge. I ended up voting for all three because, without even having to think too hard about it, to be honest, because I thought all three of them went into the season favored to make the game, and they all actually, if anything, played better than their reputations. So it was a very easy call for me.
All right, well, let's start off with that. Let's start off with Theo Pinson, a guy that I've seen a lot, and talk about his development. Well, you know, we talked about him a lot before his senior season. I feel like I've followed Theo now since he was 7 years old, it seems like. But where have you seen him develop the most throughout his senior year?
I think as a shooter. That's always been the question for me. Even now, he does not necessarily have the most natural form. But what he does have is a track record that is increasingly lengthy. He has done it against great competition. I watched him in January against Emmanuel Mudiay, an excellent prospect who's going to play for Larry Brown. And Theo in that game was the better of the two. Mudiay is considered a top 5 player, but it was Theo, I thought, who was the individual star. And he's done that all season long. He, like I said, he does not have beautiful form. But when someone knocks down shots that consistently, I think you have to reevaluate the way that you view him. He's always been an outstanding athlete. I think he'll be a really good defender. I think he has some of the Jackie Manuel tendencies, but I don't like that comparison because he's so much superior as an offensive player. Oh,
interesting. Hopefully Jackie is not watching. Where do you think that he's developed the most, besides the shooting game, defensively? Do you think that he's come farther along in that? And do you feel like he was able to come farther along in that? One of the things that I remember from Theo is his defensive game and how aggressive he was all the time. And let's be real, I feel like this Carolina team needs an aggressive guy on defense.
He definitely has been. I would describe him as a predatory defender. He's not necessarily a lockdown defender yet because he lacks that kind of strength. But he's very instinctive. He anticipates very well. He bears some of the similarities that, for example, Marcus Page has for jumping passing lanes, but he has quicker feet and longer arms, so I think it will play out more frequently than it does for Marcus. I think he'll also be able to be more of a specialist because he will have more scoring options around him. He'll be able to grow into his offensive game and focus on transition scoring along with that defense.
You talk about his length. I don't think I realized, I don't know what game it was that he came for his official visit this season, that I noticed how long his arms are. But he is a little bit skinny, and that's something that, of course, they'll work on once he gets here. You talk about offensive game, and you can't talk about offense in the 2014 class without Justin Jackson and that beautiful floater that is beautiful. I don't even know how else to put it. So where have you seen him develop, you know, watching him from the beginning of his senior season to where he is now?
Well, like Pinson, I think it's his jump shot. He actually began his prep career known as a jump shooter. But then over the course of the travel circuit in 2013, he transitioned into more of a mid-range player, like you mentioned, with a floater. But this season, when I've seen him, he has looked to take a few more threes. He's been streaky, but I think the difference is that he's getting more elevation now than he had been during last summer. I think he's consciously worked on that, and I think the result is that he knows when he gets to Chapel Hill they're going to need him to take threes. And so I think he's attempting to tailor his game for them, along with the fact that he's a good scorer off the catch. He does a lot in between. He needs that long-distance range, and I think he's added it.
I think one of the things that this team lacks is a guy that can create for himself. Do you think Justin Jackson is that guy? Can he create for himself? Has he developed that skill?
That's a big question. I think in terms of strength more than anything else. I think he's quick enough. Not like Pinson quick.
Yeah.
And he's a fine ball handler at that size, but he's really more of a cut and catch and shoot, or do something that's sort of dinky in the lane. I would describe his game as having a lot of trash, but I mean that in the most complimentary way. He does a lot of things offbeat that don't look polished, but are for him. I think Theo, though, is more of the shot creator of the two.
It's very interesting that you say that, because watching Justin, some of his movements are so awkward and lanky, and you're just like, what was that? But the ball goes in, and you think it's a fluke, and you think it only happens, you know, once in, I don't know, a blue moon, but it happens all the time, and so it is a part of his game. I think that's a good way to describe it. Defensively, how do you see him stacking up, and is that something that he's developed over his senior year?
Like Pinson, again, he's going to need to get much stronger.
Are they the same person, Rob?
I know. There are some differences, believe me.
We'll discuss those.
But again, he's a long-armed guy.
Yeah,
he is not as instinctive in terms of getting steals. He's more of a contained defender. He's not as quick laterally as Theo. He is a better rebounder. Of course, he's quite a bit taller.
Yeah.
The question for him will be, I think it would be great if he could play some stretch four. The reason I am not optimistic right now is because he doesn't have the lower body strength. And on the wing, I have seen him have problems with dribble penetration. Of course, he's a very tall wing at 6'8". So he's going to have issues there from time to time, but he's okay. And I think on the whole, he's just such an intelligent player that if he has a bad first month, he'll figure it out.
Of the two, who do you see making an immediate and maybe, I guess, even more of an impact upon their arrival to Carolina?
That's a coin flip, because I think Jackson is ahead of Pinson offensively and overall. I think his decision-making is better. He's less turnover prone. He's less prone to taking bad shots. But he has a player ahead of him in JP Tokoto. And although I think Jackson is a superior prospect, Tokoto will be stronger and have 2 years of experience. And we know that Roy Williams values that. On the other hand, Pinson is at a position where there is not a clear starter. Leslie McDonald will be gone. Probably Marcus Page will move back to point guard. I think he would like to move back to point guard.
I think we all know Marcus Page would like to move back to point guard.
And I think Roy Williams would like to move him back to point guard. So Pinson has more of an opportunity in terms of fit. The question is whether he can bring the same things to the lineup that Jackson can. Would it be worth having Jackson and Tokoto in the lineup, even if there's a little bit of a defensive mismatch there?
Could you see Tokoto at the 2 and then Jackson at the 3?
The question is whether he can defend it.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think they could probably survive offensively. That might be a better coupling than Pinson and Tokoto, because then you would have two less proven shooters. I think Jackson will come right in and score more effectively than either Tokoto or Pinson.
All right, we're almost forgetting Joel Berry. I'm going to be honest, he's my favorite. I love Joel. He's so fun to talk to, such a great kid. It'll be interesting to see how he stacks up, next season with behind Britt and behind Paige, so we won't really get too much into that. Let's talk about his skill set and his game and how you've seen him develop through his senior season. I don't think I've watched him once this season, actually, now that I think about it.
He has a very different style for his high school team versus his travel team.
Interesting.
For Each One Teach One, which is the travel team.
I love that name.
Triumphant. They won the Peach Jam, the big Nike event. It was a culmination of all the Nike stuff. Very impressive summer. But he's a facilitator. Now, for his high school team, he likes to shoot a lot. If you only saw him with his high school team, you would think that he was a score-first point guard. And in fact, he's not that at all when he plays with other really good players. But for his team in high school, he has to be a primary scorer. So stylistically, you get a completely different athlete, high school versus travel team. I think they will like for him to probably revert to his travel team style, because if he's playing with Paige, for example, and they're in the same backcourt, he won't need to be the primary backcourt scorer. Even with Pinson and Jackson, I think that he would be the third of the three. Now, if he's getting more minutes with Tokoto, I think you might see him integrate more of his own scoring. But I think that's something for Barry that will take time.
But can you see him being a primary scorer? Does he have the ability, I guess is my question, to be a primary scorer?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't see the Lawson, Felton type scoring ability. I think that he has a strength advantage. And he will be a pretty good finisher. He draws a lot of contact. I think he'll go to the foul line, which the coaching staff will love at UNC. But he doesn't have quite the same burst. He's unproven as a shooter. He hasn't shot particularly well as a senior from deep. So I think there are some question marks about him as a scorer. I prefer him as a playmaker and a defender for the time being.
I was going to ask, defensively, has he been pretty consistent? Where has he fared there?
He's good already, and I think that he'll give the backcourt something that it presently lacks, because both Paige and Britt are skinny guys who lack strength in their lower bodies. Barry has a very different physical profile. His father was a running back, and he embodies that attitude.
He is bigger. I can already see it in his body that he, as a high school player, is bigger than Nate and Marcus both currently are. I have noticed that.
No question, and he has a wide base. Sort of wide hips. He has sort of the knees that bow outward a little bit, so he projects a lot of width on defense, unlike the other 2 point guards they currently have.
All right, let's talk about these 3 guys and how they stack up against the other players that are going to be at the McDonald's All-American game. Do you see them shining? Do you see them kind of blending in? Do you see them being a disappointment?
I would be hesitant to predict it too much until you sort of see the dynamic. And some of it will depend on what their coaches do in the practices, which I will reiterate. I say this all the time. I write it on message boards all the time. Everyone knows the game itself is bunk. It has no predictive value at all. But the practices and the scrimmage that they hold leading into the game are tremendously valuable because they are the closest we get to watching them in high school before college.
That's true, yeah.
Because prior to that, we've seen them play against each other mostly in the summer, which is 15 months before they really start practicing in college. But depending on how the coaches run the practices, I don't even know if they will do a lot of scrimmaging within the specific practice sessions. If they do, I think Jackson will still shine the most because he has the most innate scoring ability of the 3. I expect him, I've said this before, I think he'll come in next season as a freshman and average double figures. I really do.
Ooh, so
I know, it's bold, but I think it's true.
Listen, Justin, no pressure of being the star at the McDonald's All-American game, coming in and starting and putting up double figures. So good luck with that one. That's Rob Harrington. That's completely just laying it out there for you. I'm excited. I am actually going to be attending the game for the first time and all the practices and everything beforehand. So I'm excited to see. It's interesting to see these guys in their high school teams and then when you put them in situations going up best against the best. And it's a little confusing because, you know, they're not used to the chemistry of everyone around them, so it takes them a little while to get comfortable. But I think it'll be a good matchup. I think it'll be a good experience. And I get to go to Chicago and hang out with Kanye. So it's basically where I'm at.
Can't lose.
Can't lose. All right, I think that's it. Any final words on the 3? Besides that Justin Jackson is going to be the savior of this team?
Maybe we should delete that part.
No, it's staying in. You're giving people lots of high hope.
I do think, I will say this, on the whole, I've been extremely impressed with all of these guys. People get caught up in rankings.
Yeah.
I won't even go there. But I will say I think this is the best class since the 2010 class with Harrison Barnes, Kendall Marshall, and Reggie Bullock. I think they can be that good and maybe even a little bit better. Maybe.
Again, no pressure.
We might need to delete that part too.
No, we're keeping it. We're ending it right there. That's going to be it for this edition of ICTV Headlines. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.